in the same way that you see it now, like with Golden State, where when all of a sudden a guy's wide open because you made 3 or 4 really great passes. The truth of it is that's better than any dunk you can ever show me in terms of a fan. But we become so focused on that top 10 play, right? That's always individual, and I think lost something in that process. Bill, who you and I met through, was what a great guy to play with.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And we're talking about Bill Walton. I could just only imagine what it was like to play with him on the courts. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with him in business, and I like to tell people change your life, and I'm sure that's how it was on the court.
Well, it's interesting because I did get a chance. I was a freshman when Kareem was a senior, so I got to practice with the varsity for a couple of weeks, and I got to play with Bill for a whole year. And they said, well, I'm one of the only guys you can really compare him. And the difference is, well, Kareem was the greatest player I ever saw. But the difference is Bill's unique gift was that he made everybody on his team so much better. Kareem was great, but you had to play with him.
Sure.
Bill, he just made you so much better. I mean, obviously, he was great in his own right, but he found a way to step your game up. You had to fit in around Kareem, so they're just different.
So just to put that in a business perspective real quick, if you were a leader and you had to create a team, would you rather be that Kareem team or that Bill Walton team?
I'd rather be the Bill Walton team.
Yeah.
Because I think you just have more versatility. You're harder to defend. You have your options are in fact limitless in that, and I think it's much easier in terms of building up morale when you're not really just revolving around a dominant personality, but in truth ideas filter up as well as come down. I think those are the healthiest organizations, but they're hard to find because the truth of it is it takes a lot of a unique sensibility to be as good as someone like Bill and not want to be the dominant personality.
Right.
I'm not saying you didn't want the ball, but if you were open, you got it back.
Right.
Don't tell him I said so because I say he shot every time.
Well, what's interesting, too, is both those players, completely almost opposite based on your descriptions there, have both been nominated one of the top 50 players of all time. So they both have that equal level of success, but completely different ways of going about it.
Completely different. And, I suspect that if you were to talk to Bill's teammates over time and Kareem's teammates over time, that they'd have a very different, connection to the guy and sense of what it was like playing with him.
Yeah. There's a quote in off-road racing about racing the Baja 1000 in 1968, and it goes something like this: if we knew we were making history, we'd be paying better attention. And I'm listening to your story, I'm thinking, did you pay enough attention when you were making history?
Well, of course not. Yeah. No, because you're not even aware that you are.
Yeah.
But I will say this, I think that my gift may not have been a great crossover or the ability to defend the guy full court. I did sort of soak it all in. It's how I was able to convert that experience into a career telling those stories, not because they had worth as, well, what I did in basketball, but in terms of stories about team building and leadership that were really what we were getting out of that experience at UCLA that was so unique. We were part of the greatest dynasty in the history of sports. That doesn't just happen. It happens because there's a unique form of leadership at the top, and it's a form of leadership that I think a lot of people use without knowing that it necessarily came from John Wooden, and John Wooden wouldn't care if you thought it did because he stole his ideas from people.
Yeah.
Shamelessly, proudly, because he felt that, there was nothing wrong with the idea of going to see Frank Leahy's great Notre Dame football team and realizing that some of the things that they did on the practice field in terms of how quickly they moved from drill to drill was something he could bring into basketball. Sort of, where'd you get that idea? I watched a football practice.
Yeah.
because good ideas come from everywhere.
And we talked about that before the show today. Is there's nothing wrong with borrowing somebody's idea, especially if they're successful at it, right?
Wrong. I mean, what's stunning to me is how many people actually start with that predicate that there is something wrong with it, when in truth, Jim, you and I both know this, that the people that you steal them from almost always are actually thrilled that you have. Yeah. That it's a gift that they have transferred onto you, and they're flattered actually to see that you have taken that characteristic on and now you're using it yourself. I mean, there are selfish exceptions to that, but the people that I've been around in my life, I really feel have been very flattered. I mean, when I went back to Coach Wooden and basically said, Coach, I'm sort of embarrassed. I haven't talked to you in 25 years, but everything I know about leadership I learned from you. How did he feel? He felt fantastic. And,
yeah, sure.
And by the way, and so did I, in acknowledging something that should have been obvious to me a lot earlier.
And by the way, if you're listening to this show, this is when you write that down on a piece of paper. It is okay to use somebody's successful idea, and more than likely they're flattered. So, like I said, we could talk about a lot of your topics all day long. But that's a nice segue. Let's touch on your business life a little bit. When you look you up on Wikipedia, I mean, it's so impressive the career that you've had in television.
I think I ought to do that. I never have. I better look myself up on Wikipedia.
Oh, you look good. You look
okay, good.
But here we are in Bel Air. I did the drive-in today, and you just can't help but fantasize what it must have been like, or what it's like to be involved with Hollywood at any level. And as you know, people are flocking here from around the world to do something in this arena. And you lived it, and you've had some cult shows that were just, major, major hits. How did you left UCLA and you put the stake in the sand where you were going? How did all that start for you?
Well, this is another really good lesson. I had some great mentors in my life, but clearly two of the greatest teachers I had were Chick Hearn and Vin Scully. Because I was a kid who grew up a sports fan. And every night I got to listen to Vin or Chick, left to right across your radio dial, as they told me this story that was unfolding before them. And so the fact that I went into a business where I helped people tell their stories and then eventually became a motivational storyteller myself, well, my professors were Chick and Vinny.
Yeah.
The greatest mentors you could ever have. And did I have any idea that I was, learning something valuable from listening to a Dodger game? No. Well, what was I doing? I had the greatest storyteller in the world. I remember one time they had a fogged-in game at Candlestick Park, and he told a story for 45 minutes till the fog lifted. And I was mesmerized by the power of stories. The power of stories that, like this podcast, as you know, one person hears one thing that gives them the sense of, yeah, today I'm going to get off my butt and try something that I've been afraid to try. Not only will they feel better about it, but God, I hope they write to you and tell you, because it will feel so fantastic to you, even though you don't know them, you've never met them. But the idea that your words and your stories can inspire other people, that's the thing that really was for me. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, when I got fired at CBS, Leslie fired me. I had 7 shows on. He didn't really want to compete with anybody else there. and so I went home on a beautifully paid golf vacation. And it took me 18 months to figure out that what I really loved to do was to tell stories that help people change their life for the better. And of course, once I figured it out, it was like, why didn't that take me 5 minutes? I knew that all along. But of course, those sort of basic, North Star questions of what is it that drives you? What is it that you really love to do? And that was it for me. It doesn't need to be it for everybody. I mean, but people who are trying to figure out what's holding them back and why they're not getting where they want to go, have you really figured that piece out for yourself?
Yeah, no, during those 18 months, I mean, was there a process that you went through, like some type of formal process, or were you just out bouncing around, floundering, feeling bad you got fired, or did you know you needed to find something?
Well, first of all, I didn't feel bad I got fired. That was okay. But it was a thoughtful process. I really wanted to come to – I realized that I had a lot of options, but that it was sort of silly to kind of try and figure out, what options the world was going to dangle before me before I figured out what options I wanted to pursue. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of us, we're so insecure that we immediately, oh, great, I could go do that. And it's sort of like, but do you want to do that? Does that get you excited in the morning? I mean, all those years that I did motivational speaking, I told people they paid me to get on a plane, not to speak.
Yeah.
Getting up there for that hour, felt like 10 minutes went by so fast. I was soaking wet when it was finished, and I felt great. And that wasn't work. That was play, because I was telling stories to help people change their life for the better. I was hooked onto my North Star, and like I said before, it's embarrassing. Why would it take you 18 months to figure that out? It's so simple, but I think sometimes with sort of that those basic truths that we hold about ourselves, they're buried pretty deep in there with other people's expectations of what we should be or could be or they'd want us to be.
Yeah. I think sometimes we just get in our own way, too, because we don't have the confidence to say, yes, I can go be a motivational speaker, right? And I can influence people's lives.
Well, to be honest, I didn't know of such a thing.
Right.
I really didn't. I wrote a book because I felt like I needed to write this stuff down. Right, that was my story. I didn't know that you could be a motivational speaker. I also didn't know that writing a book was a really good first step to becoming a motivational speaker. But I had this old coach, and he was getting older, and I felt like I had a sense of how his ideas could help people in business as opposed to other coaches in sports. And of course, the first time I asked him, he turned me down.
So here you are, you're going to write a book, you want to reach out to John Wooden, so you make the call to
Oh, no, I don't make the call. I'm seeing Coach all the time. We're so close at this point, you can't imagine.
And he turned you down.
And but I want to write this book, okay? I actually had been on a cruise and had written a treatment while I was on this cruise, but I wasn't going to do it without him. And it was like asking Jim, like, was asking 20 girls to the prom, and I finally got up the courage, and I asked him. I said, Coach, I want to write a book, and I want you to be my partner, and this is what I want it to be about. And he said, no, I'm writing 2 other books now, and I don't think it's a good time.
Wow. Were you crushed?
Crushed. But the next day, he got a letter from me because I went home and I wrote him a letter because I was crushed, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. And I said, Coach, my mom died 10 years ago and my dad died a couple of years ago, and it's really hard for me to think about, but someday you're going to die too. And if you let me write this book, I'll spend the rest of my life teaching people what you taught me. But you got to let me write this book. And he called me the next day, and he didn't say hello and goodbye. He just would start talking. I guess it's an Indiana deal. And he said, well, young man, you write a fine letter. I hope you write a good book.
Wow.
But I had to go back. I mean, it's not just asking. It was asking the second time.
Sure.
That got him to yes. But I think that oftentimes people don't understand that, you might get turned down, but it's a lot easier than living with that sense the rest of your life of, but I never asked because I thought he'd say no.
But what I'm curious about, too, is you asked him in person the first time, and then you asked him the second time in a letter. Do you think that the letter itself had more rich content in that ask?
Well,
because you had to go back and write it. It sounds like that was a really powerful letter.
I don't think I could have looked at him and said, "You're going to die too."
Yeah.
I don't think I could have said that to his face. But it was something that, having lost both my parents, I'd already dealt with.